When I quit school at 16, I said I have to risk everything on tennis now.
Roger Federer might go down as not only the greatest tennis player of all time, but also the greatest sporting icon of all time. But the reasons why he's considered one of the GOATs might surprise you. When it comes to records, Federer has some mind-blowing numbers, winning an incredible 20 Grand Slams men's singles titles. Along with this, he's won an absurd 103 ATP singles titles, which is second behind the great Jimmy Connors, who's on 109. Not only this, but he's managed this during the period which has been dominated by the big three. Interestingly, when Roger was a child, he was very active. Along with being a good tennis player, he was also good at basketball and football. But the reason why he ended up playing tennis tells us a lot about him.
Yeah, I always liked the idea of being in control. Like in tennis, you win or lose, it's you to blame. In soccer, I always felt like, the goalkeeper made this mistake, why didn't he tackle that guy earlier? And I always would find these excuses.
So this begs the question, how does a boy who grew up in the Swiss city of Basel go on to become one of the greatest tennis players ever? I believe there are three main areas which makes Federer stand out above the rest, and this starts with how he handles pressure. On the court, Roger Federer is renowned for being cool, calm and collected, but this was not always the case in his younger days. During the start of his time on the tour, he was known for having lots of talent but a short fuse. This would often hold him back from winning titles.
Could have maybe realized my potential sort of 2 years earlier, started to work really hard earlier, understand what I was trying to achieve, what was possible. But at the same time, I think all of that was good for me later on, that I got all the stuff out early, the anger, the sadness, the pressure I had to deal with so much. I felt like between sort of 16 and 22, that later on, that made me the player I am today.
This is common for us all when we are younger. We have lots of energy and sometimes it gets expressed in the wrong manner. Imagine all of that but being under the spotlight of being a top-class tennis player. Luckily, during this period, he had a North Star in the form of his then coach Peter Carter. Carter was a former Australian tennis player himself, and he spotted a young Federer and wanted to develop his talent.
I think he has had the most influence on my game as a coach, and of course next to my parents, maybe also as a person, We had great times together, it's very clear, and he really actually, I think, teach me the beautiful technique I play today.
Tragically, Carter died in a car accident whilst on his honeymoon in South Africa in the summer of 2002. At the time, Roger was playing a tournament in Toronto, and when he found out his coach had died, he ran onto the streets crying uncontrollably. Heartbreakingly, it was Federer who suggested the location, as his mother is from South Africa. Losing an influential figure in your life is hard at any point, never mind in your early 20s. Certainly this was a fork in the road for Federer. He had to decide how he was going to go through the rest of his life dealing with this loss. Mark Rosset, who is another Swiss tennis player and friend of Federer, was quoted as saying, "You have to go through such moments. They are more formative than an Olympic victory. If you win a medal, you are happy, and everyone congratulates you. Okay, but grief triggers more intense emotions." The Federer after Carter's death was a different man, a more grown-up man. He wanted to make his former coach proud. He didn't want to waste the talent which Carter seen in him. Symbolically, Federer won Wimbledon in 2003, just over a year after the death of his former coach. This was his first ever Grand Slam victory, and we're going to start a period of domination by Roger at the highest level of tennis. This experience would have been crucial in the development of a strategy Roger calls fire and ice.
So I think you gotta have fire in the belly, wanting to win every point. You give it your absolute best, and the ice in the veins for me is basically you're so focused in the most important moments. You are so calm and so composed. That's what it is.
Previously, in his youth, Federer just played with fire. He would get over emotional, but when he learned to incorporate being cool, calm and focused, his career went to the next level. The impact of Carter has always been there for Federer.
What do you think he would have thought to see you here now with 20 Grand Slams? It's okay. I'm sorry.
I hope he would be proud. I guess he didn't want me to be a wasted talent, so I guess it was somewhat of a wake-up call for me when he passed away, and I really started to train hard.
This fire and ice strategy also had an impact on how Federer approaches matches he loses as well as wins. He can stay objective and see everything as an opportunity to learn from, win, lose or draw. Given the fact he's lost someone close to him in tragic circumstances, he understands that it's down to him how he deals with losing a tennis match. So why not make it a positive experience and take away all the learnings possible?
Yeah, I mean, I always knew life goes on, but before I used to really be super sad, but just because you try to make the breakthrough. Every loss you take, it's like a step back. Today I don't think it's a step back when you lose. You actually can gain something from losing sometimes. So it's just a mindset. But just because I go drink champagne after Nadal lost, it doesn't mean I don't care, really.
This links to the second point around Federer's brilliance. He has a stable and simple family life outside of the tennis court.
So the moment I walk off the court or the moment the match is over, I go almost into relaxation mode, and then maybe that's what's kept me mentally sane and mentally ready to go for another match tomorrow and not get too tired, you know. I really see it like separated, you know, sort of the player and the person. And so I am a person until I walk on court, and then maybe I go into that tunnel vision. But even then, I'm able to really relax the moment the point is over.
The phrase "behind every great man is an even better woman" comes to mind with Roger. Federer met his now wife Merke at the 2000 Sydney Olympics when they were both representing Switzerland. Unfortunately, Merke had to retire from competitive tennis in 2002 due to a foot injury, but ever since then she's been travelling around the world supporting Roger. It is certainly at the stage now where it feels strange to see Roger play and not see Merke supporting him on the sidelines.
Didn't quite start here. It started actually at the Sydney Olympics, also in Australia, but that was almost 1.5 years earlier. So we were already rock solid couple.
So why is having a simple life off the court so important? Well, it gives you a sense of calm. Federer's life is probably stressful enough. Imagine if he had a complicated family life as well. Everyone knows of a famous sports star who has a complicated life outside of their respective sport. But Federer is not like this. He trains and spends time with his family. Some people might find it stressful to travel around the world with a young family, but it works for the Federers.
You travel with your family with you, don't you?
It's a lot of work. It's, yeah, I mean, that's what it is. I like it. It's the only way I can see it working for me to still stay on tour, and the kids need to be happy on the road though. We have the 4 children, and just a lot goes into it. It's just busy household, and sometimes busy nights as well.
This comes back to the point around having different stresses within your life and how shifting focus can actually improve performance in different areas. Let's imagine if it was before a big final or semi-final and Roger was spending all of his time thinking about the opportunity in front of him. This would be enough to make even the most resilient players start to feel anxious. Instead, Federer now does something which is a little bit different.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're talking, you know, maybe once or twice a night. Diapers, you name it, I had to do it all, you know. Sometimes before semis, sometimes before finals.
Right.
But I've had a great support team, great wife, of course, who's always been there and has said, don't worry, I'll, you know, fall asleep, you know, don't do it. And sometimes it's just too loud, you know, so you do
still
wake
winning
up.
titles.
It would not be outside of the realms of possibility for Federer to get annoyed at his kids for waking him up just before a big final. After all, everyone is human. But this links to the final point around why Federer could be the greatest sporting icon ever, and that's the fact he does things with class and grace. Federer thinks about his actions in context of tennis as a sport as a whole, not just as what he's doing as an individual. This type of long-term thinking is always a good thing. He is thinking about what the new kids on the tour will see and how he can guide and mentor them, like people have done with him previously.
For me, it's very important to leave the game better off. It's important that the players have a good image, that kids and juniors can look up to us and say, I want to maybe be like him, because that was very important for me when I was coming up.
He strikes a balance of thinking about future generations coming through on the tour, whilst also having the utmost respect for his current competitors. For example, every year when he plays at the Basel Open, he will buy pizza for all of the ball boys and girls, because this is where he once started. But listen to how Federer dealt with the 2009 Wimbledon win against Andy Roddick, and most importantly, the impact it had on his opponent.
And the thing that I remember is your team coming in and you giving them like silent fist pounds and kind of giving them hugs, but it was in a very reserved manner, because it was like you were taking into consideration that this was hard for me. Do you remember that moment at all? Or?
I mean, the moment is probably tougher for you than it was happier for me. I think it's so important to respect, you know, your fellow athletes and competitors, and I know how hard you've tried.
Not only this, but Federer does not forget who's helped him to get where he is today, which brings us back to his former coach, Peter Carter. This is why whenever he plays in the Australian Open, you will likely see an elderly couple sitting behind Federer's coach, and this is Carter's parents, with Federer paying for an all-expense trip to Melbourne for them to witness the event, which includes them staying at the same hotel as Roger, and even inviting them to the winners' party after the tournament. This is the measure of the man. Federer even sent a message congratulating his rival Rafa Nadal after he won the 2022 Australian Open, meaning Nadal now has the record for the amount of Grand Slam titles with 21, one ahead of Federer, but he still took this as an opportunity to be happy for someone else. This guy's a class act, but in fact one of Federer's greatest achievements has nothing to do with his performances on the court, and everything to do with his charity work, which was inspired by his mother. He's self-aware enough to understand people do not get the same opportunities which he had, and he wants to try and change this.
I guess I struggled in school, and when I heard that, or when I realized that most people on this planet don't go to school or don't have a good school system, which is in Switzerland so normal. Everybody has education, everybody has got great quality of teachers, great classrooms, everything you need is right there. I felt like that's the right thing to do.
The fact that Roger Federer goes about things in the right way is the culmination of all these 3 points. He knows how to control himself on the court, which is helped by the support of his family in the background, and this gives him a base to be able to inspire and impact people in the right way for the future of tennis and mankind. So the biggest lesson to take away from Roger Federer is you can be massively successful, but you can do it in the right manner and be a force for good in the world. Before I leave you with a mindset shifting perspective on how Roger Federer wants to be remembered, please consider subscribing. This is The Club, and on here I'm going to be breaking down world-class operators from across sports so we can all live richer lives. With that said, let's see how Roger Federer wants to be remembered.
The kids can improve and have an opportunity to go to school. As we know, a lot of children don't have an opportunity to go to school in Southern Africa, and we try to have an impact, a true impact there, and it's something I'm really looking forward to. The foundation is now over 15 years old, and I still feel I'm only at the beginning, so hopefully one day I can be as famous for my philanthropic work like for my tennis life.